Hey everyone, Sam here. Thanks for joining me. I hope you're having a beautiful day wherever you are in the world. Well, it's a beautiful winter's day here in northern New Zealand, so I thought I'd come outdoors and film the intro here. And it's this area that's the feature of this video. What I did was, a few weeks ago, I went outdoors plein air painting and painted the view behind me there. I just love painting in this area and I love painting outdoors. It's such a great way to improve your painting skills. When you paint outdoors, it really makes you look at the landscape and look at those colours and values. And there's lots of challenges involved as well, but I've found that overall I've had some absolute light bulb moments from painting outdoors, and it's really improved my painting skills. Now, even if painting outdoors is not for you, I'd still think you'll enjoy this video because the way I paint outdoors is pretty much similar to the way I'd paint in the studio as well, except of course in the studio I usually add a bit more details to my paintings. So this is the painting that I did when I was out here a few weeks ago, and in this video I'll just show you some of the process of how this painting came together. So before we get into the video, I'll give you a quick tour of the area and then I'll show you some of the process. So sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy the video. Well, up, this is just a beautiful area around here. There's just so much to paint. Look at that, that's a painting right there. In fact, I painted this on plein air the other day. I'm going to do a studio painting of it as well, so I'll show you the process of that as well. Right, so I've got my Alla Prima Pochard box all set up. This is great for plein air painting. Got my panel here, so this is an 8x10 linen panel, absolutely perfect for painting outdoors. And the colours I'm using include titanium white, burnt sienna, yellow oxide, but you could also use yellow ochre, cadmium yellow, cadmium orange, quinacridone crimson, you could also use alizarin crimson instead, ultramarine blue and phthalo green. So this Pochard box just mounts on a tripod and it's really convenient for painting outdoors. There's also some storage compartments for putting panels in, and there's a drawer there as well. So we've got an additional paint palette, and just get that out there, brush holders as well, and then storage for things like paints. You can also rest your brushes on there as well, so really useful. And this is the view I'm going to be painting. Just a nice simple landscape. Such a beautiful area up here in Northland, New Zealand. So it's technically autumn at the moment, but we're sort of in the subtropics or just bordering the subtropics, so it's quite a bit warmer. There's a lot of native trees as well, which are evergreen, so green all year round. But I don't know if you can see in the distance, there's some poplar trees. They've lost all their leaves already. But I just love this view. As I say, nice simple landscape. It should look really good in a plein air painting. And this is where I'm set up, just about to mount the cameras so that I can film the process. Right, so my panel's all set up here and I'm going to put paint to linen, and I begin by sketching out my composition. Now, at the time of the day, it was autumn in northern New Zealand, and I reckon I probably had about a good couple of hours to get this painting done. I'll first of all sketch out the composition using a mix of burnt sienna and some liquid original, and liquid original is the medium that I'm going to be using for this painting, as it speeds up the drying time, which is very useful because I'm using oil paint. and it also improves the flow of the paint as well. So I get this composition sketched out. The main thing I want to convey is just the atmosphere of the location that I'm painting. I just really want to capture those rolling fields and those different greens in the landscape, and also paint a few of those trees as well. So we're all about atmosphere with this painting, not so much on the detail. And this is the beauty of painting outdoors, as it really allows you to be expressive with your brushwork. If you want to add more details, you can certainly do this, and quite often with some of my paintings I've brought them back to the studio and added more details to them. But in most cases I leave them as field paintings just as they are. Now that I've got my composition sketched out, the first thing I need to do is identify where all my dark values are in the landscape. And value refers to how light or dark a subject is. Now this is particularly important when you're painting outdoors, because the sunlight's going to be changing and the shadows are going to be moving as well. The other thing is, although the day I was painting it was pretty sunny and I was quite confident that it wasn't going to cloud over, it could just as easily cloud over very quickly. So if you've got your dark values in first, then it's going to make it much easier to paint the areas in light, even if the sun has disappeared behind the clouds. Now if you watch my other videos, you'll see that I always talk about painting your dark values first, and this is just what I find is easiest for me, and something I learned from some other plein air painters when out painting in the field. So this is very useful for painting outdoors. As I started painting the view here, there wasn't that many shadows, but I'm quite familiar with this location, and I knew that within the next couple of hours those shadows were going to get more pronounced and longer as well. So I was actually able to already account for this in this painting. And the first thing I did was start off with the shadows in those background trees. And for this I used a mix of ultramarine blue with some burnt sienna, some titanium white, and also a little bit of quinacridone crimson. Often shadows can have a blue cast to them, and I've noticed this a lot in New Zealand. And I think this is a good go-to shadow mix. It just looks really nice in paintings. Now as we come forward in the landscape, those shadows are going to be getting darker, and this is because we'll find our darkest darks in the foreground. But then as we move into the distance and as landforms recede, our darks aren't as dark. So keeping this in mind is going to help us to create the atmospheric perspective in the painting. The darkest shadows in this painting are in the Tortora and Monterey pine trees that are more towards the foreground, and for this I used a mix of ultramarine blue with a little yellow oxide. Also, some of that burnt sienna that I used to sketch out the composition is going to mix in with these colours as well. So at this point the shadows are there. Painting looks a bit weird at the moment, but you'll see what's going to happen next. Basically what I've done is I've already created a value range that I can work from. So I'm going to go back towards the furthest zone in the painting, and that's the sky. Nice blue sky on a day like today, a couple of clouds in the distance, and for this I've mixed ultramarine blue with some titanium white, but then I've also greened up the blue a little bit with some phthalo green. Only a small amount, you don't need much. I'm using big brushes here to mark in the paint, mainly number 5 flat brushes. I've also used number 3 and number 2 flat brushes and number 3 filbert brushes. The filbert brushes are pretty cool because it's got a nice rounded edge to them, so you can get some different marks with them. The brushes I'm using are made by Rosemary & Co, and they're really nice brushes to paint with. I've put a link to the Rosemary & Co website in the description box below. So next I start marking in those distant trees that are in the full sunlight. Now trees are some of the darkest values to be found in the landscape, so this is something to keep in mind. And they need to be much darker than the grass so that they stand out. Also because grass is a much lighter value. I also need to desaturate the greens in these trees so that they do sit back in the landscape. Green is a colour that tends to drop out quite quickly over a long distance. And for this I mix ultramarine blue with yellow oxide, titanium white, and there's also a little bit of quinacridone crimson mixed in there as well. For the mid-ground trees I just increase the saturation of the colour, also using less titanium white. I can even mix a little bit of cadmium yellow in there as well, which is also going to further increase the saturation of the green. Then next I paint the fields in the background, and again I want to desaturate those greens quite a bit so that they sit back in the landscape. Now green's one of those really dodgy colours where if you get them wrong they can look awful, but if you get them right they can look absolutely amazing, and this is partly the reason I prefer to mix my own greens rather than using pre-made greens, with the exception of phthalo green. And I use phthalo green more as a kicker to kick up the saturation of the colour, so this can be very useful, but you only need a very small amount of this, and I rarely would ever use this colour on its own. So here I mix ultramarine blue with yellow oxide, titanium white, and I also mix in a little bit of phthalo green as well. I even round off this colour with a little bit of quinacridone crimson. Just adding the red in that mix is going to help to make the green look more natural. Then as I move forward into the painting, the grass in the midground and foreground is going to be much more saturated, so this is where I'm going to introduce cadmium yellow, which is a high chroma colour, so chroma being another word for saturation, and that's really going to boost that green. I also round off the colour with a little bit of quinacridone crimson, adding that red element in there. Mixing in a little bit of phthalo green will also shift the colour to some of those more emerald tones. For some of those areas of exposed dirt, I've mixed yellow oxide with titanium white and quinacridone crimson. If I need to desaturate it, I can mix in a little bit of ultramarine blue. But because I've been using these colours throughout the rest of the painting, it's going to tie everything together and make that exposed dirt and mud look harmonious with the greens. I paint the areas of the tree canopies that are in the foreground with a mix of ultramarine blue, cadmium yellow, yellow oxide, titanium white and some cadmium orange. I don't need much titanium white because the value of these trees is generally quite dark. For the pine tree on the left side of the painting, I also mix in a little bit of phthalo green. Then following that, I paint the main stems and branches within the trees, just painting a few suggestions. Now at this point in the painting, I've pretty much marked in the major zones within the scene, and I've created an overall tonal dynamic and got the general colours and values in there. So now the whole thing just needs to be tidied up. And the beauty of using Liquin Original within the painting is, by the time that I've got to this stage, it's already starting to form a bit of a tack, which means I can add some more paint over the surface. So as I said, I'm now just going to be focusing on tidying up the painting and adding some more details to it. I work back and start with the sky again, using the same colours as before. I mark in a few of those distant clouds with a mix of ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, some titanium white and a little bit of quinacridone crimson. Then the next thing I do is work on those distant trees, and I'm going to restate these shadows within them. Also within the landscape, as the sun's moved by this point, we're starting to see more of the shadows within the trees and fields. So I'm using the same colours as before, but just restating those shadows to give more form and definition to the trees. I continue this process working forward in the painting, then also adding a few more layers to the grass as well, just to also try and eliminate the white of the canvas underneath. As I work on the grass in the foreground, I'm using a number 5 flat brush, and I'm adding some more layers in there just to create texture within the grass. Still using the same colours as before, which is a mix of cadmium yellow, ultramarine blue, a little yellow oxide, titanium white, and then I round off that colour with some quinacridone crimson. I also mix in a little bit of phthalo green just to shift the hue of the colour. And I paint some darker elements within there as well, just to add texture to the grass. Here I'm sharpening up the shadows within these trees in the foreground, again using a mix of ultramarine blue with yellow oxide, and then also painting the shadows within the grass, keeping in mind that the grass is lighter in value, so those shadows are going to be a little bit lighter as well. It's the shadows within the landscape that are going to help with the three-dimensional effect of this scene. I start to finish up the painting by adding in some more fine twigs, branches and areas in light on the main stems of the trees. At the time of the year it was autumn in northern New Zealand, and the landscape's a little bit different here because it's just bordering on the subtropics, so much warmer, and we've got a whole mix of tropical and subtropical plants along with temperate plants as well. So these black poplars within the midground had lost all their leaves already, but I thought would look great in the painting, and it also helps to break up some of those trees within the midground, adding more interest overall. Now, as I finish up the video here, I'll just share some of my thoughts on painting outdoors. For me, it's really helped to improve my landscape painting overall, because through painting outdoors I've gained a much better understanding about colours and values within the landscape, almost direct teaching from nature itself. So whilst painting outdoors may not be for everybody, I'd still recommend you give it a try. It's really good fun. Regardless, my method for painting outdoors is the exact same as my studio techniques as well, so I pretty much have the same approach. If you really want to get some life into your paintings and just boost your confidence in painting as well, then painting outdoors is the way to go. Now, if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you're new around here. Also, check out the link below to the lesson notes that accompany this video if you'd like to learn a bit more about the process, or just if you'd like to have a go at painting this artwork yourself. I've provided some reference photos there. Also, I have a full-length version of this video, which is about pretty much an hour and 20 minutes long, on how I painted this whole thing. So I show you this whole painting in real time. So I've put the link to my Patreon channel in the description box below. If you'd like to learn more about painting landscapes in general, then check out the painting resources I have on my website, which includes the free written painting tutorials I have on my blog, and also I have some full-length painting tutorial videos for sale, available from my website at samuelearp.com. And again, I've put the links in the description box below. So then, once I've got my painting finished, I love to just turn it around to the light and just look at it in the landscape as well. Really happy with this painting. So I hope you enjoyed this video and it inspires you to get your paintbrushes out and paint some landscapes. I hope you have a beautiful day. Thanks for watching and happy painting.